Hello students, we're going to go ahead and look at some examples from section 10.1 on goodness of fit tests. So I encourage you to read the information in the section to answer this first question. So for that first question, you can find the answer in the book. By reviewing the information on page 528. So it gives you the conditions that the data must meet, okay, before you can perform this kind of test. Okay, so I encourage you to read that carefully. So let's go ahead and skip over to the second question. And the second question says, a survey was conducted two years ago asking college students their top motivations for using a credit card. Okay, so let's go to look at problem 2. And it says, a survey was conducted 2 years ago asking college students their top motivations for using a credit card. Okay, you think this distribution has changed. You randomly select 425 college students and ask each one what the top motivation is for using a credit card. Okay, so in the table here, you can see the different responses. And in the second column, we have the percentages or proportions for each response. And then likewise, in the third column, you have the results of the current survey. Right, so how many students said their top motivation was rewards, the low rates, cashback, and so on. Okay, so the question is, can you conclude that there has been a change in this distribution, okay, according to the new survey results? All right, we're going to use a significance level of 0.10, and then complete parts A through D. Okay, so in part A, we're going to state the null and alternative hypotheses, and then identify the claim. Okay, so the null hypothesis is that that the proportion or percentage for each response is what it says in the table here. Okay, so the null hypothesis would be that that the top motivations are 28% for rewards, 24% for low rate, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's going to be our null hypothesis. Okay, and then what is the alternative hypothesis? Is that the percentage or proportion of students whose top motivation is rewards, low rates, cashback, or discounts has changed, right? So these proportions have changed. Okay, so, or it is different from the old survey. So that'd be the alternative hypothesis. Okay, and then which one of these two is the claim? Right, and then it would be the alternative hypothesis. Okay, so it's important to know that that this type of test, right, a goodness of fit test, is a right-tailed test. Okay, so it uses the chi-squared distribution. Okay, but just know that that this type of test is a right-tailed test. Okay. Okay, so on page 528. All right, so that's important to keep that in mind. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to StatCrunch and find the critical value for this test. Okay, so to identify the critical value from a chi-square distribution, you need the level of significance, right? And whether it's a left-tailed, right-tailed, or two-tailed test. So obviously this is a right-tailed test. Okay, and you need the degrees of freedom. Okay, so again, according to the information here, the degrees of freedom is k minus 1. Okay, where the the letter K represents the number of categories. Okay. Right, so in the context of this problem, right, the number of categories is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right, which is the response, right, right. So how we are categorizing the students' responses for their top motivation, right? So there are 5 possible responses. Okay, so therefore there are 5 minus 1, which is 4 degrees of freedom. All right, so let's go to the chi-square distribution calculator and StatCrunch. Okay, select standard. Okay, so the degrees of freedom is 5 minus 1, which is equal to 4. Because this is a right tail test, we're going to select the greater than or equal to symbol. Okay, and notice how it points toward the right. The pointy end of that symbol is to the right. Okay, so this is a right tail test. All right, so in this box, we're going to type in the level of significance, which is 0.10. Okay, and in this box will be our critical value. Right, and notice how the right-hand side of the graph is shaded, okay, which is what we want because this is a right tail test. So this is our critical value here, and then this is the corresponding rejection region shaded in red. Okay, I'm going to round that to 3 decimal places. So 7.779 would be the critical value. Okay, so since the rejection region is in the right tail, right, it's clearly this answer here. If it's not this answer, then it would be this one. Okay, these other ones don't make sense because the symbols are pointing toward the left. Okay, so the direction of the inequality, right, whether it's greater than or equal to, right, must match the type of test that you're doing. In this case, which is right tail test. Okay, and again, that's not very helpful. So again, so this is the greater than or equal to symbol. So then you select the greater than symbol. All right. So then we need the test statistic. So once again, we're not going to make reference to any of the formulas for calculating that test statistics. Again, this is the formula you use to calculate the test statistic. Okay, so we're going to avoid using the formula and then use StatCrunch instead. Okay, so let's go back to the stat menu, and then let's select goodness of fit, and we're doing a chi-square test, not a normality test. So select chi-squared. Okay, and what we need to do is enter the observed and then expected frequencies from the problem. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy the table. All right, and paste it so that we have the responses in one column. The proportions in the middle column, right, the proportion of the responses from the previous survey, and then we have the observed frequencies in the third column. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the column that contains the observed frequencies, which is, according to the table, in the column titled New Survey Frequency. Okay. And then it wants the expected frequencies. Okay, and notice that they're given as percentage. So let's see what happens, right, when we select the column that contains the percentages. Okay. Okay, I don't think we need to worry about the other options here. It does say in terms of the display that the expected or that expected is selected, so we're going to leave that selected. So let's go ahead and click compute. Now, if somehow we're not getting the right test statistic, right, we'll have to make an adjustment. Okay, but this is our sample size. These are the degrees of freedom. Okay, then we have the p-value. So obviously we can compare the p-value to the significance level and make the decision right away. But it's asking for the test statistic. Okay, so It's a little more work to do that way. Ask for the test statistic and the critical value. But in any case, right, this is our test statistic. So 10.402. And I believe it wants us to round it to 3 decimal places. So 10.402. Okay, so that's correct, right? So that's what it wanted. Okay, so we entered the correct information. All right, so now we want to decide whether to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, that's part D. So again, you compare your test statistic to the critical value. Okay, remember this is a right-tail test, so the rejection region of our tests would be any test statistic that's greater than 7.779. Okay, if you go back and look at our little graph here, right, we see that our test statistic of 10.402 is clearly in the rejection region, right? It's somewhere right here, right? It's in the rejection region, right? This is the cutoff for the rejection region, which was 7.779, right? That's the cutoff. Okay, that was our critical value. Right, so sorry, the test statistic of 10.402 puts it in the rejection region. All right, which means we reject the null hypothesis. So we reject the null hypothesis. So at the 10% level of significance, right, there is enough evidence to conclude that the distribution of motivations differs from the old survey. Right, so in other words, the most recent survey shows that college students have different motivations for using a credit card. Right, the motivations for using a credit card has changed compared to the old survey. Okay, and that completes question 2.